Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. We've got Mike Hersh with us. I'm so pleased to have Mike with me from PD America. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. As I was just starting to say, I've been fighting off hopefully just a bad cold, maybe a COVID variant.
Ooh.
But in any case, I'm doing okay. Thanks. How are you doing, Hal?
Well, I'm just grateful that we can do all of these shows virtually, so we're not in the same room. People think we are, although your background's a little different than mine, but
A little bit.
that
Yeah,
way I don't have to risk my health, which I
that's
would
right.
do for my viewers, of course, but I'd prefer not to if I can avoid it.
Absolutely. You go above and beyond.
I try. So, Mike, I really appreciate the fact that you reached out to me, and I want viewers to know that Mike, wanted to share his thoughts on the Maryland U.S. Senate race. I already interviewed, I don't know if you saw it, Mike Juan Dominguez, who was my candidate, my choice. He pulled out. I think he recognized he really didn't have a shot, and he's now running for Congress in the 6th district, I think, although correct me if I'm wrong, I get the numbers wrong all the time. He is definitely the progressive in that race. Really like him. Probably won't win. You wanted to talk, though, about the two primary Democratic options versus the now just announced Republican former Governor Larry Hogan. So what prompted you, if I may ask it that way, to reach out to me and say, Hal, let's talk about the Maryland race?
Well, it comes down to this. Before Hogan entered the race, it really was a two-person race on the Democratic side, and whichever one of those two, or if somebody else somehow managed to get the nomination, they would probably win because the usual Republican opponent is some kind of fire-breathing maniac who's very easy to defeat. Larry Hogan is not a fire-breathing maniac. But I do think that a couple of things are very important to me, and your viewers may agree or disagree. And I respect all the opinions, but I think that Larry Hogan would be a horrible U.S. Senator. I think he was a horrible governor for Maryland, and we can go into why I believe that. I also believe that if the Democrats hold the Senate, a bunch of good things can happen. There's no guarantee that they will. But if the Republicans take the Senate, then a whole lot of bad things will definitely happen. And so I think in the grand scheme of things, all of a sudden Maryland becomes very, very important. The Senate race in Maryland suddenly becomes very important.
Yeah, well, I won't disagree with you there from the perspective of national politics, control of the U.S. Senate, which is basically on a knife's edge right now. I believe it, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 50-50 with Kamala Harris, the vice president, the deciding vote. So in that regard, it's really important. From the standpoint of the policies that the U.S. government pursues and whether those policies benefit poor, struggling, and working people and address the very, very grave challenges we face, the moral imperatives that this time has presented to us, that I believe is a much more difficult question to answer. And I was so glad to have you reach out. I think you do watch my program. You know that I often take a pox on both your houses' approach. I find the Democrats as reprehensible as a party in many ways as the Republicans. On balance, there are probably more not really atrocious Democrats than there are not really atrocious Republicans. I'm willing to go that far. But many Democrats whom progressives view as not really atrocious or even really good, I think are truly reprehensible. And I will throw out the name Jamie Raskin yet again because I find him to be as bad as just about anybody in Congress, one of the most divisive figures, one of the people who make it the most difficult for us to bring about progressive change. So I am far, far, far from an any blue will do Democrat. In fact, I'm pretty much the opposite. Let's get into it. Raskin, of course, a Democrat in Maryland and considered the most progressive in our caucus, in our Maryland Democratic caucus. I put up there, our heads are very little on the left side of the screen for people who are watching. I believe it's left. Yes, I'm looking at our stream. So Mike and I are on there. And also the three candidates who you can tell have more professional photographers than us. Angela also Brooks to the far right of your screen. top, then to her right, if she's looking out at you, Trone, and then, of course, Larry Hogan, who's in the center. And I put their positions up there because I just don't really see any real advantages to any of them. But before we get into a Republican versus Democrat, let's talk about Democrat versus Democrat. Do you have a preference? And obviously you're not limited. I just chose 5 issues that really struck me and I think are important in Maryland, and I thought kind of highlight right now are important, and that also highlight why I'm not inclined to vote for either Trone or also Brooks. I'm certainly not going to vote for Hogan. So using these issues, using other issues, taking issue with my issue framing, Mike, tell us why you think either Democrat is better than Hogan. But first, do you think either Democrat is better than the other Democrat?
I think that the differences between the two Democrats versus either of them being much better than Hogan is much smaller than the differences between them and Hogan. In terms of Trone or also Brooks, you're correct. Neither one of them has supported Medicare for all. There have been distinct differences between them. Apparently, David Trone has been much more supportive of labor than also Brooks has. And part of that might be the jobs that they've had. As a county executive, there's a lot of tension between the budget and what the public unions want. The unions want better pay and working conditions for their members, as they should. And because Larry Hogan's hero, Ronald Reagan, slashed funding to states and localities, our counties basically don't have enough money to operate. And that's been a problem for decades. And that's one of the main reasons I think Larry Hogan told on himself. I think Ronald Reagan, this might be controversial, but I think Ronald Reagan was a worse president than Trump. I think Ronald Reagan drove us backwards and saddled us with like an early 20th century government as we were knocking on the door of the 21st century. So he pushed us back a century or more. And the fact that Hogan feels that this is a great heroic thing, writing in Reagan, who, by the way, was not even alive at that point. So, you know, I think Hogan gets props from the never Trump Republicans for that. And then also the Democrats who are, fixated on Trump is the worst thing ever to happen. I think Reagan was worse.
Well, there you go. Obviously, it was a political stunt that Larry Hogan wrote in Ronald Reagan. It was, had nothing to do with, it was purely performative. I mean, there's no way to see that it had any real value in doing so. I have identified 3 presidents whom I believe are clearly inferior, worse even than Trump. Ronald Reagan was not on that list. I go from Andrew Jackson to Nixon, of course, and then to George W. Bush. And this has to do a lot with their foreign policies. I think there's a good argument that Reagan was worse than Trump, especially because of the massive cuts and taxes on the wealthy. But I would argue that you can make a case for Reagan being no worse than Trump, because ultimately the Soviet Union did fall during his reign, while he was president or shortly thereafter. And I think he does get some credit for that. I don't want to get into an argument about who's worse, Trump or Reagan. I'm just giving you my rationale. You can reject it if you like, but I think it's a harder sell also. I think it's very easy to point out what Bush did, destroying Iraq, turning the Middle East into basically a terrorist zone, what Nixon did, bombing Cambodia, Andrew Jackson, the Trail of Tears. Those seem to me horrors that Trump really can't compete with. Also, Abu Ghraib under Bush, letting us get hit. I think there's a good argument he kind of let that happen. Those are all arguments, I think, that make it pretty clear that Nixon, and Jackson were worse than Trump. I think you can see both. I think that's a harder sell for many Americans when it
Well,
comes to
Reagan
Reagan.
was also involved in the Iran-Contra um, treason, basically, where not only did they break U.S. law, but they also tipped off the Iranians that Jimmy Carter was ordering another rescue mission. Um, and Under Reagan, while his wife was out there saying, just say no to drugs, Ollie North and a bunch of other people were scheming to bringing in incredible amounts of cocaine that set off the crack epidemic that devastated our inner cities. And they actually armed the various gangs in the inner cities, causing violence and strife. And I think the only thing that kept Reagan from starting a war was everyone expected him to, and they were keeping a close eye on him. And don't forget that Reagan quipped about attacking Russia with nuclear weapons and put
I mean,
the
I'm
Russians on
open
a
to the
high
argument.
alert.
I'm open to the argument that Reagan was a worse president than Trump, but I'm not clear that he was a worse president than Trump. I am clear that W was, that Nixon was, and that
Andrew
Jackson was,
Jackson.
and that's
Oh, yeah.
understanding also that Trump might fall further down on to the bottom, right? If he gets
If he gets
reelected, we
another
don't know. I
chance,
mean,
yeah.
with another 4 years, it's conceivable he'll bring us to the bottom. Although because he has been promoting peace in Ukraine, I think that he has been. Although I think he's pulled back a little bit. I give him a possibility there that he will move up the list as well and be a less bad president. Can you make a case? But getting back to Maryland though, because I really do want to stick there with Mike from pdamerica.org. Can you make a case for either also Brooks or Trone or both of them without referencing Larry Hogan? In other words, is there an argument that these are actually qualified people who would be good U.S. senators, who would actually do the people's business, who have stood up to special interests, who are willing to buck their party leaders? Can you make that case, or can you only argue, well, things will be less bad if we elect them than if we elect Larry Hogan?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question because I'm not a fan really of anybody who doesn't support Medicare for all. We talked about this before, and Medicare for all is one of the most fundamental no-brainer policies. Overwhelmingly supported by the American public, overwhelmingly supported by Republicans, independents, and especially Democrats. And yet we've seen glacial progress on this, despite me working on that with a lot of other terrific organizations and wonderful people. On the merits, Medicare for all would save hundreds of billions of dollars and it would save tens of thousands of human lives, and it would cost less than what we're doing now, and it would make life better for people in so many different ways. And the fact that anybody would be against it, I'll tell you, speaking for myself and for Progressive Democrats of America, if you don't pledge to support Medicare for all, you will not get endorsed by PDA. It doesn't matter what else you do. Number one, that's one of our litmus tests. Some people say, oh, I don't want to have a litmus test. I want to have a sliding scale. PDA does not. If you don't support Medicare for all, you will not get our endorsement no matter what. And just to circle back to Jamie Raskin, I know we disagree on this, but Jamie Raskin has always supported Medicare for all. He did it on the state level when he was a Maryland state senator, and he also has done it since he's been in the House.
He voted for Hakeem Jeffries. He supported Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker of the House, just as he supported Nancy Pelosi before Jeffries. And both of those two are committed to not allow Medicare for all to ever happen. It's easy to pay lip service to an issue when you're not. I've got you muted for a sec, Mike. So I've got you muted because I just want to make my point here. It's easy to pay lip service to something when you have leadership that you know will never allow that issue to come to a vote. So it's easy for him to buck the party establishment virtually, while in reality, he's right there supporting it. In addition, his grandstanding play to impeach Trump after Trump was out of office meant that precious time when support could have been built for Medicare for all was wasted on a complete distraction that only made Trump more powerful, that only made Trump stronger. Raskin did not support Force the Vote, which would have been a way to try to maybe leverage the power that progressives did have in that moment. There is zero way you're going to convince me that Jamie Raskin is in any way an ally of Medicare for all. All right, go ahead, try to convince me.
Okay, well, I'll try to achieve the impossible dream here. Force the vote was a stupid idea. It didn't make any sense. And I've been in the trenches on
I'm going to
Medicare
interrupt
for
you.
all.
Sorry, it's my show. I get to interrupt. So you mean when the Republicans have repeatedly forced the vote, the hard right Republicans have repeatedly forced the vote, they haven't gotten anything out of it?
They've dragged their party to the extreme right.
So you don't want our progressives to drag the Democratic Party to the left. Is that what you're saying? Because you get that Republican right wingers have made a real difference in how their party operates.
Yeah, they've made it so their party doesn't operate. But that's not what this was about. I've been in the trenches working on Medicare for all. I've met with John Conyers, who was the original sponsor of HR 676. We had weekly meetings and we built strategies and we worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. Force the vote was not the way to get anything done. None of the people on the roundtable that we meet every month on advancing Medicare for all thought force the vote was a good strategy.
They're part of the friggin' establishment. They betrayed working people just like the Raskin did, just as Jayapal did. They got nothing. You just said it's moving as a glacial pace. It's not moving at all, Mike.
Well, there was an opportunity there. Conspiracy theorist. You got to define who's they, who's betraying.
They are the people who are leading the movement for Medicare for all in Congress. They're just as much on the side of the Democratic establishment, which is totally bought and paid for by the big pharma and for-profit healthcare.
Yeah, well, you're wrong about who well, first of all, name the people who I'm working with.
I would assume, first of all, maybe you're working with different people. The ones that I know about are Jayapal, who's generally the first one who all of the grassroots groups are working with is Jayapal. The lead
sponsor of the bill really doesn't want the bill to pass.
Well, she didn't fight for it. She's not willing to take on her leadership. She may want it to pass. I'm not saying she doesn't want it to pass. She certainly did not. She didn't vote against Nancy Pelosi. She voted for Hakeem Jeffries for House Leader. If she really wanted the bill to pass, why would they vote? If you really want something, if something's really important to you, if it's the most important thing in the world to you, if you recognize that getting that could be a game changer, do you vote for your party leader to be someone who is clearly opposed to what you want?
First of all, Nancy Pelosi is not clearly opposed to Medicare for all. She's been an advocate for it in the past, and she actually got the public option passed in the House when Obama was president. And if Obama fought for a public option in the Senate,
I give her credit for that. I give her props for that. I give her props for that.
We might have Medicare for all today because the public option would have sapped the strength of the for-profit insurance industry. And I think it was a mistake for a lot of people, including PDA. PDA did not support the public option. I thought that maybe that was a mistake. I don't always agree with PDA. I do side with the organization in terms of getting things done. But I do think that it was a mistake not to push through the public option. But I think Obama was dead set against it. I think that was the problem. But Pelosi, and she has a lot of faults. She is not dead set against Medicare for all. And I think the thing to do would have been, instead of force a vote, coax a vote. Because the Congress, and you know this, Hal, the Congress does not make any sense. The things that are extremely popular on the main street and anywhere but Wall Street, very popular among Republicans, independents, and Democrats alike, don't go anywhere in the House, and especially not in the Senate, because it's ruled by big money. the people in the Congress are not like us. They're very, very wealthy people. They associate with very, very wealthy people, and they ignore a lot of the things that that we need. That said, you can get a lot from Nancy Pelosi or Hakeem Jeffries by being their friend and not getting their
What
hackles
have we
up,
gotten from
as
them? What
opposed,
what exactly has being friends with Nancy Pelosi gotten anybody?
well, I think you can answer that question
No, I
yourself. What have
can't.
we
I
gotten?
absolutely cannot. I cannot answer it. I don't know. I see bloated military budgets. I see a country that is extracting more oil and gas than it ever has, that is the number one producer of fossil fuels, that is moving in, not moving at a glacial pace, is not moving towards Medicare for all in the least, as in fact moving away from it as the for-profit healthcare industry has become ever more firmly and completely ensconced in complete control. I see ever greater debt by the U.S. government. I don't see higher taxes on the wealthy even being discussed as being part of the conversation. I see a Democratic Party that's begging for billions of dollars for endless war in Ukraine. So I don't see anything that's come out of those being friends.
I'm disappointed in you because you usually don't rely on fallacies, but those are all fallacies. Listing things that you didn't get does not prove that you didn't get anything. And that,
okay, well,
and
what
you just filibustered.
I told you I didn't see. You tell me what we have gotten.
Negotiation on pharmaceutical prices
for like
under
2
Medicare.
or 3 for a very small number for a small number of meds.
How many?
I don't know, it was like 10.
Well, that's more than 2 or 3. So.
Okay, I'm just saying for 10. Okay, 10. When there are what, thousands on the market?
And an effort. Well, on some
why
very
are
important.
You satisfied? Why would that satisfy you? The very bare minimum.
Satisfied. You don't. See, you're disappointing me, Hal. You don't usually put words in other people's mouths, but you just said that I was satisfied. I didn't say I was satisfied.
It satisfies you enough to vote for them. So, that's how it satisfies you. It satisfies you to say, okay, they're good enough for me. The party of endless war in Russia, the party that says we've got to support Israel as they commit genocidal acts. It's okay. I'll support. It's good enough for me because they got us negotiations on 10 drugs.
In you. You're usually better than this.
Well, are you saying it isn't good enough for you to support them?
No, I'm saying this. I'm saying that there's such a thing as a theory of change, and force the vote was a theory of stopping change. It was picking a fight that you were going to lose and humiliate yourself and set back the cause of Medicare for all. And the fact that these, how long ago was that? 2 years ago?
It was 2001. It was 2021. It was 2021.
So we're going on 3 years that the squad who has fought on a bunch of different things, on the Build Back Better, a lot of them voted against that.
You're frozen, Mike. For some reason, let me see if I can refresh you. We lost you.
Yeah, that's a frozen position and not a very flattering one.
Not clear. Let me just go. We'll take you off, and hopefully you'll come back in just a sec.
Okay,
if I can.
Let's try that.
Get my just Hal. Where is my Hal? There we go. I know.
Maybe
all right. Well, come back, Mike.
System.
Now you'll just see me. So there you go. Mike Hersh with us. It's getting a little heated in here. I feel like I'm debating Arlen, and I'm kind of bummed. I was hoping, Mike, you would be a little bit more willing to recognize the cupidity, the corrupt nature of the Democratic Party, how it's merely the flip side of the Republican. And yes, on balance, I'll give you this. There is some drug price negotiations, but on some issues, the Republicans aren't even as bad. For example, the Republicans have been fighting to keep more billions and billions and billions to go to Ukraine to fund endless war and to lead to another 100,000 or so dead Ukrainians. So they do get some credit for that. I'm trying to understand how you can look at what the Democrats have done and be satisfied that's enough for you to support them.
I'd be confused about that too, because I'm not satisfied.
No, it's enough for you to vote for them. You're saying we have to vote for them.
Well, keep in mind, PDA will not endorse anybody who doesn't support Medicare for all, who doesn't support us on a lot of fundamental issues, including um, global warming, including ending corporate rule. There's a bunch of other things. So PDA exists because we aren't satisfied with the Democratic Party. We launched because we didn't support John Kerry. We didn't trust John Kerry. And when we met, you were a strong supporter of John Kerry. So I'm glad to see that you've come over to where PDA is,
Well,
where you're.
I do take a position, Mike, that sometimes you do vote for the lesser of evils. That race between John Kerry and George W. Bush was between Kerry and one of the three worst presidents we've ever had. So there's that. I also think John Kerry wasn't as bad as the current Democrats that we have now. I mean, they've gotten worse over time. I supported Al Gore in 2000 over Nader. I didn't think Nader had any business coming within a sniff of the presidency. And Al Gore really was pretty damn good in a lot of ways. Since Obama, I think the Democrat Party has really dropped off the table. And I include Obama in my criticisms of them. Not that they were good beforehand. We saw people like Dick Gephardt and Howard Dean who betrayed working people, going to work for Big Pharma, doing a lot of really, really bad stuff. And certainly the Democrats have been for endless war, but it's gotten worse. Clinton was a terrible president. Clinton did a lot of harm to the party build, that is, of course, and his wife was no prize either. I think Kerry and Al Gore have a decent core to them. I don't see that in the current Democratic leadership. They're just purely sociopathic in the ways that Republicans are, in my view.
I do think that the overlap between Republicans and Democrats, it's way too big. I think that a lot of the Democrats are driven by consultants who really don't care about working people. They don't really care about policies. They'll argue one thing on Monday and the opposite on Tuesday because they basically get paid millions of dollars a year to go on MSNBC and CNN and drive up divisiveness and make scurrilous accusations like the Republicans have been doing, at least since Newt Gingrich, and I would argue Reagan. Reagan was so against, he wasn't just against Medicare for all, he was against Medicare for anybody. Reagan famously predicted that if Medicare, regular Medicare was passed, that we would be in a communist dictatorship by now. And luckily he was wrong about just about everything. And it circles back to that's Larry Hogan's hero. I mean, if you're going to write
we get
hold
it.
on, hold
Larry
on.
Hogan is bad.
No. It'd be really great if I could finish making a point. You're stepping on my punchlines. If Hogan wanted to vote for a dead Republican, he could have voted for Lincoln, who I think was one of our better presidents, as opposed to Reagan, who was one of our worst.
All right, I'll laugh at that. That's a good one. I have a question. Are you bucking the PD America format, which is you, Mike Hersh, will endorse a candidate who doesn't support Medicare for all?
My endorsement of these candidates wouldn't matter. Would I tell people that they should vote to help the Democrats hold the Senate? Yes, I will tell people that we should vote in the general election. Hold your nose and vote for anybody. I would even though I deplore him as a person, if Manchin was running in West Virginia, I would say hold your nose and vote for Manchin over the Republican, who's even worse and won't caucus with the Democrats. Because
so there's not really much to discuss, because I think we agree that both also Brooks and Trone are really bad options, but you believe that we have a duty to vote for the really bad option because Hogan, I guess, would vote for Mitch McConnell to be Senate Majority Leader instead of Chuck Schumer. Is that it? Is Chuck Schumer some kind of paragon of goodness and decency and light and sweetness? So therefore, as long as he's the Majority Leader, we'll all be good?
Well, as long as Bernie Sanders is a chairperson, rather than if he's in the minority, he might retire. I think that that's something significant. I think Bernie Sanders alone, as the chairperson of a committee, is important to keep the Democrats in charge of the Senate. In terms of confirmations of judges, I think if the Republicans will blockade all of the judges, even the ones who, when Obama was in office and there was a vacancy on the Supreme Court, and Obama intentionally nominated somebody who'd be palatable to the Republicans. And Mitch McConnell, who I think is underrated, I think he'll go down in history as one of the most skillful politicians of all time. He has been almost single-handedly able to prevent any campaign finance reform from going through.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's
he's been
any
able to hold his caucus together through thick and thin, and he's the architect that made it possible for Trump to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices who systematically are dismantling all of our environmental protection, all of our ability to have clean water and clean air, all of our, minuscule protections for working people, whether it's organized labor or disorganized labor. They are carrying out a bloodless coup that began at least since Nixon packed the court with right-wingers, especially with Powell, who wrote the infamous Powell memo, who was the architect. He wrote the blueprint of the extreme right-wing
they were awful.
surge.
Powell, and then, of course, Rehnquist. And Warren Burger was certainly on economic issues very, very bad as well. So was Powell. Powell and Burger were not as awful on social issues, but they were terrible on economic justice issues. Rehnquist bad on everything. No question. These are bad people. But the Democrats are hardly powerless. And to point fingers at the Republican justices as though that's our problem. No Republican justice pointed a gun at Joe Biden and said, you have to approve all these LNG plants down on the Gulf. No Republican justice said to...
Oh, you don't even have to go there. Biden's complicit in Clarence Thomas being on the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
One of the least qualified and malicious
why
sources.
Can't you acknowledge, and I'm going to say it that way, this obnoxious way of phrasing it, why can't you just acknowledge that what we're doing now isn't working? Voting for the duopoly isn't working. It's making things worse and worse and worse. Regardless of whether a Democrat or Republican is in power, things get worse. Regardless of whether the Senate is in Democratic or Republican hands, things get worse. Regardless of whether the Speaker is Pelosi or Mike Johnson, things get worse. We need to go in a different direction. That means we don't support Democrats anymore.
That's a very clear, concise argument for your theory of change. Now, let me tell you why you're wrong. For the 11-year-old who gets impregnated, possibly by a family member, and can't get an abortion, it matters whether you support the Democrats or the Republicans. For LGBTQ plus people in this country who are seeing their existence legislated against, their health care outlawed. Wyoming is passing a law that says that their children can be taken away from them if they listen to their physicians and the best practices to get the health care they need. Their children could be taken away from them, kidnapped. It's a rerun of what happened to Native Americans under Andrew Jackson and others, where their children were kidnapped from them and then basically torturing children. That's the Republican Party right now. And if you can't see the difference, I don't know what to tell you. If
you were a factory worker in Ohio, you saw your job sent overseas because of the free trade policies that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama embraced. You see your health care expenses go up because they refuse to champion any kind of true government provided health care. Well, I'm not saying the Republicans aren't really bad. If you're living in a climate sacrifice zone, Mike, you're still being sacrificed. You're right. There are discrete groups. The Democratic Party plays identity politics very, very well. And they do go to certain people and they say, oh, your life really sucks because of Republicans. You won't get that abortion. You this. And it's true to a degree. But what they also do is give you a tiny little crumb, a moldy crumb, and they tell you that's good enough. And that seems to satisfy you because you're satisfied that that's enough for you to vote for them. I'm saying it isn't. I'm saying that that's taking us down to a worse and worse place. That's destroying our children's planet. Yes. And I don't know why you would keep supporting that. I don't understand it.
I'll tell you why. I'll try to explain it again. Women are not a special interest.
No, I'm not saying you should vote for Republicans. I'm not saying the Republicans are anything good or special. I'm saying, and the Democrats had plenty of opportunities to protect the right to choose, and they failed to do that.
If you don't vote for Democrats in the general election, then you are basically enabling republicanism.
And if you vote for, and if you do vote for Democrats, you're enabling democratism.
That's
you're
right.
enabling endless war in Ukraine. You're enabling huge budget deficits because they refuse to raise taxes on the wealthy. You're enabling a completely corrupt House, which is run by the congressman from Wall Street and AIPAC. I don't get how you don't see this.
Well, that's because you're talking and not listening.
I'm listening. I keep hearing you point to the Republicans. Your only argument for the Democrats is the Republicans are worse.
No, that's not true. The Democrats are objectively good in some areas, which you admit, and then you go to say, you kind of double talk on it, which is disappointing. I understand that you're very passionate. You feel personally betrayed by the Democrats. You see the worst. I
don't feel personally betrayed. My life is great, Mike. I feel like the people whose lives suck because of Democratic policies who have been told you have to vote for us. We're the party of workers. We're the party of the working class. They're the ones I feel bad for. Not for me. My life is great. I am privileged, incredibly lucky. And I could easily say that this Democratic Party is better for me because they keep my taxes relatively low. I have everything I want. So it's not for me. This has got nothing to do with me.
Is Elizabeth Warren a Democrat or is she a Republican?
She's a bad Democrat. She's a Democrat who stabbed Bernie in the back. She's a Democrat who did the business of the corrupt corporate interests when she lied and said that Bernie told her a woman couldn't be president. She's
a Democrat. She's sponsored.
Of course, she is a Democrat.
She's sponsored a wealth tax.
Where did it go? Where did it go? Who picked it up?
So here's the thing. What you're doing right now is blaming Democrats because Republicans won't support what the Democrats want to do.
I blame both of them. I blame both parties.
Well, one party is trying to do what you want.
No, they're not.
The other party is Elizabeth Warren a Democrat?
She's a Democrat.
Did she sponsor a wealth tax in the Senate?
If you say she did, I guess she did. I don't know. I didn't know that, but I'll accept that.
Wouldn't it behoove you to kind of research some of these things, find out who's actually sponsoring legislation?
If the bill had any shot of getting through, if the bill had any chance of getting passed, then yeah, maybe it would behoove me.
Okay,
but it's just performative.
Okay, so what was forced the vote if it wasn't performative? Would the vote have passed?
Forced the vote wasn't performative at all.
Yes,
forced the vote was let's vote on Medicare for all. Let's see where people stand on this issue. And Mike, let me ask you this: Did Elizabeth Warren?
So you're blaming Pramila Jayapal, who sponsored the legislation, and you're attacking Elizabeth Warren, who sponsored legislation that you said you want.
I hold them responsible for not fighting for poor, struggling, and working Americans.
Would a wealth tax help in that situation?
Did Elizabeth Warren? Of course it would if it could have. If there was any chance of it happening. Let me ask you a question because you asked me one. Did Elizabeth Warren endorse? Who is your choice for president in 2020? Who did you think was the best option?
That's sidetracking.
No, don't you think who's president really matters? Yes, I think we agree who's president matters. And did Bernie Sanders have a shot at being president in 2020?
Was Bernie Sanders running as a Republican or a Democrat or an independent? He is an independent.
He was
but what
running the
was he running?
Democratic primary.
Oh,
Did
okay,
Elizabeth
but I thought
Warren
all
endorse
Democrats are
him for
terrible.
president? Did
I thought all
Elizabeth Warren
Democrats were
endorse Bernie for
terrible. Why
president?
did you support Bernie for president?
I did in 2020, yeah.
Okay, well then why are you saying that Democrats are no good? He
No, I'm
was running
asking
as a
you. You were
Democrat.
extolling Elizabeth Warren. I'm
No,
asking
I
you, did she
wasn't. I was
endorse him?
saying I wasn't extolling
Sure you
Elizabeth
were. You
Warren.
were
I
saying
was
how great she is
extolling.
because she supports a wealth
Did
tax
I
and that would
say
be good
that?
for working people.
Hell, I'm so disappointed in you. I'm so
Don't be
disappointed in you
disappointed.
because
Just respond to what I'm
here's the
saying.
thing. Have any Republicans sponsored a wealth tax? Any living
They're not good
Republicans?
on
Because
that
back in
issue.
the
They
day,
suck on that issue, just like the Democrats do.
is it an important issue to you?
It's, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of wealth taxes. I've already been through this down the road with this. I'm a
Are
much
you a
bigger
fan of
fan. I'm a
Medicare
much
for
bigger
all?
supporter. Let me just make my case because you asked me a question. I want to explain my position here. I believe much more strongly in very, very high estate taxes, starting with a top marginal rate perhaps of 99% on estates over $1 billion. I'm a very big supporter of very high income tax rates with a marginal rate of 90% on income over $1 million. So I believe better ways to raise money for the government and reduce wealth and income inequality to acceptable levels are with estate and income taxes versus wealth taxes. But given how tremendously unequal society is now, I see the wisdom of a wealth tax. But I also think that when you promote a wealth tax, you're failing. Just let me finish. I want to make my point here. When you promote a wealth tax, you're also distracting us from what is much more possible, which is, again, higher estate taxes and much higher income taxes, much higher state taxes. So I do support those. You're not responding to my point about Bernie Sanders. If Elizabeth Warren is really on the side of the people, why didn't she endorse Bernie?
False syllogism. And I'm not going to deal with false
Well, you can say it's
syllogisms.
false, but your argument
Here's
is that
something else.
she's
Do
on
you
the side of
support
people.
Medicare for all? Do you support? I never said that. Stop putting words in my mouth, Hal. That's very
What didn't you
disrespectful.
say? What didn't you say?
I didn't say that Elizabeth Warren is a champion of the people or blah blah blah. I asked you. See, you brought up a wealth tax. I didn't bring it up.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Yeah,
You did.
Yes,
You did. You said Elizabeth
I
Warren is for a
responded
wealth
it after
tax.
you did. We'll go back and watch it. You did. Okay, and we both support Medicare for all. How many Republicans have co-sponsored the legislation?
Because the Republicans are awful on Medicare for all. I don't call for voting for Republicans. I'm
Well,
against
hold
voting
on,
for
hold-
Republicans.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about distinct differences between the parties. You know how many Republicans have supported Medicare for all, have endorsed or co-sponsored the legislation in the House or in the Senate?
No, the Republicans don't support. None of
How
them
many?
do. They're all against. I don't think
That's
any
right.
of them have.
None of them do. How many Democrats?
I wouldn't know. I don't know.
More
50,
than
60
half
in the House?
in the House.
There's
More than
over 100
half
in
of
the
the
House.
Democrats.
There's over
More
100.
than half of the
Okay,
Democrats in the House.
so is your
So a
position?
majority
Let me
of the
just
Democrats
no. I
in the
want
House.
to get through this.
Hold on.
All right.
More than half of the Democrats in the House. So is it better to say that the Democrats do or don't support Medicare for all in the
It's
House?
better to say they don't, because if they supported it, they wouldn't have voted for
That's a
House.
false
Can I make
syllogism.
my point? Can I say my point?
It's not a point, but you can
Of
make
course,
it.
it's a point. If they support it, because just by saying you support this particular bill doesn't mean that you're going to do what it takes to get it through. If they really supported it, they wouldn't have voted for Hakeem Jeffries or
That's a
Nancy
false
Pelosi to be
syllogism.
their leader.
It's a false syllogism.
No, it isn't. Of course it isn't.
It absolutely
Okay.
isn't. Because
Okay.
I could say if you supported Medicare for all, you'd tell people vote for all Democrats.
Well, I wouldn't say that because the Democrats don't support Medicare for all.
Well, I would say if you supported Medicare for all, you'd recognize that that more than half the Democrats in the House have co-sponsored the legislation, and
Right.
zero Republicans.
Let's
have.
try this a different way. If it, do you think that voting for a Wall Street backed AIPAC champion reflects a desire for a more peaceful world and a world where we have Medicare for all? Would that be who you would vote for? Someone who I believe does want truly wants Medicare for all and a more peaceful world, would you support Hakeem Jeffries to be House Leader?
As opposed to who?
No, I'm just
As
anybody.
opposed to Genghis Khan or
Well, as opposed
Mussolini.
to say, Pramila, would you run against Hakeem Jeffries? Would you say, you know what? This guy isn't representing my interests. He doesn't do what my constituents want. He's not there for them. So I'm going to run against him.
It would depend on the situation.
Well, why wouldn't you? What situation would cause you not to challenge him?
If it
you
didn't
just said
make
most
sense.
Democrats, there's a
if
lot
it
of
didn't make sense. Well, most Democrats do. It's not I just said. You can look it up.
No, but the point I'm making is this.
Like
if the Democrats, if most
Democrats.
If
you think I'm making it up, look it up.
Okay, if most Democrats want Medicare for all, then why wouldn't most Democrats vote for somebody running for House majority leader, either majority or minority leader, who's for Medicare for all?
A lot of reasons, and we can go through that one at a time. But that's a false syllogism.
No, it's not.
It's a false. It is. It absolutely is.
Not. Well, we disagree.
Because
we disagree.
Because to co-sponsor Medicare for all puts a target on your back. If you co-sponsor Medicare for all, Big Pharma is going to try to defeat you.
Okay.
Big insurance is going to try to defeat you.
So yes, doing what's right is challenging. But if you're not going to do what's right, why would I vote for you?
Well, a lot of Democrats are doing what's right, and you're not giving them any credit for it.
I'm not giving them any credit because we're not seeing any benefits from it.
Well, so in other words, if legislation doesn't pass on the first try, it's not worth even trying to do it. And forcing a vote on Medicare for all wasn't worth doing because it wasn't going to pass.
All right. Well, we'll have to agree to disagree. We'll just have to agree to disagree. I really can't.
You're disagreeing with yourself. You're saying a strategy makes sense if it's basically performative to try to.
It wouldn't be performative. It wouldn't be. How do you know it wouldn't pass? There hasn't ever been a vote on Medicare for all. Maybe it would have passed. You said there are all these Democrats who support it. Maybe they would have actually voted for it.
Supported it, but how many Republicans would have voted for it?
Well, if they vote against it, then you go into their district. Since you just said yourself, it's a very popular policy, right, Mike? So you go into their districts and you say, you know what? Your guy doesn't want your children to have health care.
We do that in the primaries, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. But in the general election, because of the money that the pharmaceutical corporations have and the insurance companies have, they destroy Democrats, even in pro-democratic districts. Where I grew up, there was a woman who had endorsed Medicare for all, and PDA supported her. And she was destroyed with TV ads, talking basically lies about Medicare for all. You're assuming that people know the intricacies of the policies and can't be fooled by money. One of the reasons I want to get big money out of politics is because it enables huge corporations and APAC and a bunch of other organizations that we disagree with to tilt the playing field through propaganda and lies.
I agree with you. I totally agree with that. And I want to respond to that point. No, I agree with you on the big money. I want to respond to that point in a couple of ways. One, that if your concern is all that big money that's polluting politics, then why wouldn't you again support a leader of your party who isn't bought and paid for by APAC and corporate and Wall Street? And that's, I mean, if you really believe, as you just said, and I think you're right, if Medicare for all is stymied by for-profit healthcare industry, lobbyists and the like, why would you vote for somebody like Hakeem Jeffries, who's completely in the pocket of those industries, to be your House leader?
I would only vote for Hakeem Jeffries if I were in his district and he was running against somebody worse.
No. Why would you if you're Pramila Jayapal? Why would you if you're AOC? Why would you if you're Ayanna Pressley, and you really, why would you if you're Jamie Raskin?
You're going
And
to
you
have to
really
ask
are on
them.
the side
You're
of the
gonna,
American
you're going to
people.
have to
Why
ask
would you
them.
vote for this guy to be your House
You're going to
leader?
have to ask them, invite them to be on your show. I can't read their minds, and I
Doesn't
don't
it
know what
strongly
went on in their
suggest to
meetings.
you? Wait, doesn't that strongly suggest to you that these are dishonest people? That these are liars? These are cowards? Well, it
No.
does to me. I guess we just see it differently. That's how I
Well,
see it. And if also wouldn't you say that a big reason that big money is able to kind of besmirch Democrats and make the people think, or besmirch people and make people think they're not on their side, because there really aren't such great differences between the Democrats. The Democrats haven't stood up as one and said, we are the party of single payer universal health care. I agree. It would be really tough. At this point, people are so suspicious, so cynical, so convinced that everyone in Washington is corrupt, that everyone in Washington is against them, that it's very, very difficult. I agree. We have come to this place, which we didn't have to be at, but we are there. So now, how do we change that dynamic, Mike?
That's a very good question, Hal. It's an honest question. The reason PDA exists is because the Democratic Party is not what it should be. And keep in mind, the Democratic Party, like the Republican Party, they're both corporations, and they're corporations that are supposed to be intent on electing people from their party. The Republicans are much better at it than the Democrats. The Democrats have been at the highest level infiltrated by mercenary, they're called consultants, but they're not. What they really are hired flacks who go out and do the bidding of corporations. And the Democratic Party is rotten with them. They're self-interested. They say and do things that keep Democrats from getting elected. In some states, the Democratic Party leadership in those states collude with Republicans to keep Republicans in control. And when a progressive Democrat runs in a Democratic primary, they crap all over them. What does that mean? What does that mean? The Democratic Party, if you remember, was founded as a pro-slavery party. It was. The Republicans were the abolitionist party, Abraham Lincoln. Somewhere along the line, the Dixiecrats, who were Confederates, who were racist through and through, realigned into the Republican Party. That their departure made the Democratic Party better and the Republican Party worse. So right now we have a situation where the Republican Party, which was founded as an anti-war party, they broke apart the Whigs. Abraham Lincoln was against the Mexican-American War. Some of the Whigs were pro-war, some were anti-war. I'll tell you, the preferable end game I have is that the corporatists in both major parties should start their own party and call it corporatist, which is what it would be, and leave the progressives in the Democratic Party to be a truly Democratic Party. We're not there yet. In fact, we're getting farther away from that. And I think that some people who, with the best of intentions, are saying, a Dem exit, leave the Democrats all suck. They're playing into the hands of the corporatists, because what that does is, as progressives leave the Democratic Party, progressives become irrelevant. They have no power and no influence. And as they leave the Democratic Party, they lose the chance to even vote for a Bernie in the primaries. And that's what the corporatists want. There are no easy answers. There are no silver bullets. There's no force to this or force to that when you don't have the force or the power to do it. It's disappointing. It's frustrating. You and I are not used to being in a helpless situation. We're used to being white dudes who get respect just because of the color of our skin. And we both went to good colleges, and we're both very articulate, and we're both kind of smart and talented, if I do say so myself. We're not used to being told we don't matter, our voice is unimportant. I would argue this: by not taking out a magnifying glass, and in some cases a microscope, to detect the differences between the Republicans and the Democrats, and especially by walking away from the Democratic Party, which is a mess that we helped make and need to clean up. I think that we're betraying working people, and we're betraying people who need abortion care, people who need nutrition care, because Democrats by and large vote to support SNAP programs, Republicans do not. And people are freaking starving. I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but I feel like swearing when I think about how the Republicans try to attack nutrition programs that actually benefit the country much more than they cost us. They're
Oh yeah,
investments
no,
in
look,
children
I'm not,
and people.
again, this is not a call, this is no brief for Republicans by any means.
No, I know, but the thing is,
it's
by
not,
walking off
but
the battlefield,
let me just
walking off the
respond.
battlefield, you're enabling the
Let me just
Republicans.
respond to a point that I want to just make here. If we are satisfied that it's okay, I know you hate the word satisfied, I'm going to keep using it because
I'm a very unsatisfied
You're
person.
clearly satisfied with the Democrats because you keep voting for them and you're calling for other people to vote for them. You may not be happy about it,
for me,
but you're satisfied. You're satisfied because you keep voting for them.
I'm desperate.
All right. So here's my question. How do you change this party if you go on the air and you say, I'm going to vote for somebody like Angela Alsobrooks? You should vote for Angela Alsobrooks, even though she agreed with Larry Hogan's plan to fund education with casino gambling money. I believe we should support David Trone, even though he supported billions or hundreds of millions of dollars, almost $1 billion, to private industry to help avoid the opioid crisis, which is his big issue, that went to corrupt companies that didn't deliver because he refuses to embrace government health care because he would lose some power over his employees. It would actually be, in terms of profitability, he would make more money in his business if he supported Medicare for all because it would take the burden of providing health care for his employees, which I know he does. I know people who work for Total Wine More and they do get health care. So that's good. He should get credit for that, of course. But he would be saving a lot of money if there was Medicare for all. But he doesn't. He's not even one of those Democrats who support it because I believe, as close to a billionaire, having the power to determine whether someone gets treatment or not, gets health care or not. If I fire you, if you don't do what I tell you and you walk, if you refuse to obey my orders, employee, laborer, get the F out of here, you have no health care. So okay, I'll do it. If you try to compete with me, if you open your own liquor store, you won't have health care. That's the benefit that this Democrat gets by our private for-profit system. And he's like, okay, well, let's get we'll negotiate for drugs with Canada and this and that. If that's your belief, how do you have any leverage over the Democratic Party to force it to change?
Well, first of all, you have to understand there's a difference between in spite of or because of. I would not support anybody who did that because they did that. I might have to in spite of what they do. And you raised a very good point, leverage. How do you have leverage over the Democratic Party if you vote for them? Well, how do you have leverage over the Democratic Party if you say, I'm never going to vote for them?
Well, I don't think you should say you'll never vote for them. If there's a truly progressive candidate who has demonstrated over time that they're willing. Look, I think it was right to vote for AOC when she ran in 2016. She said she would, or 2018, whenever it was, her first time, she said, I'm going to stand up to the Democratic leadership. And for like a week she did, and then she stopped. So yes, I don't think you should never, ever, ever vote for Democrats if they really have demonstrated a willingness to vote against their party leadership. That's a really big deal. But there are alternatives. The other way you change the Democratic Party is that you elect people from other parties who are better than Democrats, and then either they accept that. If they continue their pro-corporate ways, they'll lose races, or they have to change, or they have to evolve to survive.
you're making a few dangerous assumptions. One of which is that the Democrats would rather win with a progressive than
Well,
lose to a
I totally
Republican.
agree. I don't think they would rather win with the progressive.
So
And
how?
if they
So
choose
how?
not to, then they lose, and then we vote for the Green Party or whoever the
And they
alternative is.
don't care. They want you to vote for the Green Party. They do.
Okay,
And the
well,
problem. And the problem with
I don't
that
think
is,
that's true. So you're saying the Democrats just as soon lose elections as win?
I'd say the consultant-driven decision makers in the Democratic Party would much rather lose to a corporatist Republican
I
than
agree.
to
So then
Bernie.
why would you vote for a Democrat who's acceptable to the
I
corporate
vote for me.
wing?
I vote for me. See, this is the thing that I argued with
How is
people
that for
throughout.
you? How does that benefit you to vote for somebody that is
I would
benefiting the
be happy
corporate
to
wing?
tell you if you stop talking and let me talk, because you're really unlike your usual self.
No,
You're
because I really
filibustering a lot.
find this because it's so frustrating, Mike, because we're in such an awful place and things keep getting worse. And you're promoting, this is why I'm not really angry at you, but at the mindset that you represent, that there's something really better about the Democrats, that really, if we just keep doing what we've been doing, things will somehow become better. And
Well,
there's zero evidence to support that theory.
well, well. Back in 2000, that was your position was arguable. Back in 2000, it made sense to say, well, if we can make Al Gore lose by supporting Ralph Nader in Florida and some other swing states, then the Democrats will come to their senses and be a lot more progressive because otherwise we'll just keep making them lose. If that had resulted in Bernie, who was still around then, being the nominee as opposed to flip floppy John Kerry, you could say, okay, Nader was right, it worked. But I
Well,
think
I
that
disagree with you on
Nader,
that. I already said I voted for Gore and I'm proud of it. And I think Nader is a big part of the reason we are where we are now. I vote for candidates if I think they're good, decent people who will do the right thing. I don't believe any of these Democrats we've been talking about are good, decent people who will do the right thing. I did think Al Gore was not perfect by any means, but on balance, better than he would have made things, in my view, better. The Democrats we're talking about now are on balance making things worse.
see, I disagree. I disagree with you there because I think what I'm hearing from you is the same thing I heard from Nader and the people around Nader in 2000, that the Democrats are essentially irredeemable. There are a handful here and there who are maybe confused and shouldn't be Democrats. They should join the Green Party because the Democratic Party is an irredeemable mess. The Democrats are just as bad or so bad that they're indistinguishable from the Republicans. They agree on all these different things. So therefore,
Well,
we
Bill
should just
Clinton
kind of
was.
sit
Let
it
me
out.
interrupt. Wasn't that was true about Bill Clinton, right? Bill Clinton was as bad as the Republicans. We might have been better off now if George H.W. Bush had been reelected rather than Clinton in 92. I'm not convinced Bob Dole would have been a worse president than than Clinton was.
Bob
I'm
Dole was
not certain
really
that if Hillary
terrible.
were president and if Hillary had won in 2016, she wouldn't have been just as bad or worse than Trump. So in many cases, Democrats have proven that they were as bad. It's a question of the candidate. It's a question of are
Well,
they a good candidate or aren't they?
well, I 100% agree with your criteria, but I don't think that you're being consistent on that. Al Gore was very much in tune with a lot of what Bill Clinton was doing to his dismay, and that's part of why Nader was able to make some points that hit home on Al Gore. I think Al Gore would have changed the future by getting us off of fossil fuels a lot faster. I think that on that single issue, which was so important, I could overlook a lot of the things that Gore wasn't very strong on. He didn't support Medicare for all. He didn't support some other things that I care a lot about. But simply moving us from this uh, addiction on fossil fuels, it would have made all the difference in the world. And I think that's why the system came together to the point of leaning on the Supreme Court to stop the vote count because they were going to prevent Al Gore from being president. And I think they would have put a bullet in him bullet in him if they
Well,
had
we
to
agree on
stop him from
Gore.
doing.
I don't really, look, I wasn't quite as involved in
But
interest in politics then. I don't know all the facts of Gore, so I'm sure people can come up with some. But I liked Gore. I thought he was a good choice. We're talking about voting for Democrats in this in Maryland. I'm saying the two Democrats running are really, really bad. I did support Juan Dominguez. I would have voted for him running as a Democrat. If I had thought that Marianne Williamson really was for peace, if she had a record that demonstrated that she was something other than a phony self-help charlatan guru, then I might have considered voting for her. I wouldn't have ruled her out completely, although I think in national politics, it's past time that we rally around an alternative to the duopoly. But in the end, I vote for candidates that I think will do things that are good, that will make things better. And I don't believe, based on their records, that either David Trone or Angela Alsobrooks will make things better. I think they will make things worse. Just as I believed Hillary would make things worse and therefore I wouldn't vote for her, just as I hoped Joe Biden in 2020 would make things better and I did vote for him, and just as he has disillusioned me and now I don't believe he will make things better and therefore I will vote against him. But you are arguing somehow that we should vote for Democrats. As I understand it, you said I don't choose Alsobrooks or Trone. It's just that what's his name is so bad, Hogan is so bad that we need to vote for one of them. That's not going to do it for me. I want a candidate who I believe will make things better. And I, again, don't think either of those two will make things better. I'm convinced, based on their records, they will make things worse.
Well, do you know that one of the first things Larry Hogan did as governor was strike the financial support for expectant mothers, poor mothers in Baltimore and in the white wastelands of Maryland that have been neglected by Republican and Democrats alike, Hagerstown, the Panhandle, where people are living in abject poverty under Democrats and Republicans alike. Hogan, pro-life Hogan, cut money to support prenatal care for women who wanted their babies.
It's awful. It's horrible. I wasn't aware of that, but I'm certainly not surprised. But again, your argument, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is Hogan is so bad that we have to vote for the. It's not that the Democrats are good. I asked you that very question. What do you like about? I asked. This was the question I asked you. Do you have an argument beyond they're not Larry Hogan in support of either Alsobrooks or Trone? And I haven't heard it. Maybe I'm wrong. I didn't hear it. I think you said something about labor, but that was all.
They both support nutrition for poor people and for working people who otherwise their children would go to bed hungry. They both support prenatal care for women who want to carry a healthy baby to term. They both believe that climate is a serious catastrophe happening and that we should do something about it. They both have the basic human decency to say that we should have a minimum wage. It should be raised, and the U.S. government, the government in Maryland, the government in Prince George's County should be on the side of people who need help. Hogan doesn't believe in any of those things.
All right, so I'll respond to a lot of that.
Opposite.
I'll respond to a lot of that. At least with it, when it comes to Alsobrooks, she has wanted to fund needed government services on the backs of gamaholics, poor, struggling, and working people who are addicted to gambling. That makes those problems worse in the end, not better. It doesn't address the underlying problems. It only makes them worse. It is true. I give you this. When it comes to the preventing people from starving in the streets or sleeping under bridges, the Democrats are more likely to be there than Republicans. And that is a reason to vote for them. And maybe that's a good enough reason. The reason it is not enough for me for this reason. When you look at blue states that are run by Democrats, you have incredibly high levels of hunger, of need. California, I have seen the streets there littered. This is a deep blue state. New York, DC, their streets are chock-a-block with starving people, hungry people, people who don't have enough. Whatever the Democratic policies may be at the very margins to try to prevent death, they're doing a hell of a bad job of it in the places where they do have real control. So I get what you're saying, but until I see a candidate who's going to say, look, we have got a fundamentally corrupt system, we need to change it from root and branch, then I just can't see that as somebody I'm going to vote for. And if they're, even if they're not willing to say that, but if they're willing to say, you know what, when I go to Congress, it's not just that I'm going to vote for Medicare for all. I'm going to vote against the leader of our party who's done everything he's possible to stop Medicare for all from passing. It's not just that I'm against a bloated defense budget. I'm not going to vote for the guy who's going to ramrod it through. It's not that I'm just against global climate change, climate holocaust. I'm not going to vote for the guy who's going to package the Mountain Valley Pipeline and more drilling in the Arctic with a must-pass bill. But I guess for you, that's okay because they say that they don't want people starving in the streets.
Well, I think people starving in the streets is a big problem, and it's not going to be solved by voting against a party leader, especially one who
Has it
already
worked
has.
is it worked in California? People are starving in the streets in those states.
Hold on. I'm not going to keep answering questions if you barrage me. So which one do you want me to answer first?
Just go ahead. Just go ahead. Just respond.
Okay.
All right.
I think that people starving in the streets, I think poor women giving birth to low birth weight babies who are going to have health challenges all their entire life, women who are going to die in childbirth because they didn't get the care they need. I think these are very important differences. And I'm glad that in my personal family, we have enough generational wealth that's not going to affect any of us. And actually, we've got a lot of dudes in my family, and my sister had one child and she had all the care she needed. But I know there are a lot of people in our community who don't have all the help they need. And to say that's not enough for you to vote on,
No,
that's your decision to
but you
make.
live in a blue state. How come the state of Maryland then hasn't stepped up and made
I
sure that
already
all those
answered that. I already answered that. Larry Hogan sabotaged that, and it was a struggle to try to get the money back into the budget because the Maryland governor has an outsized influence on where the money is spent, and we're just barely into the fiscal year for the Democratic budget with the Democratic governor kicking in, and if it continues to fail, then you'll have a case. But right now, we're trying to clean up the mess that Larry Hogan made and left behind.
what about the mess that Andrew
He had
Cuomo? What about the mess that Democrat Andrew Cuomo left in New York? What about the
that's
mess that the veto-proof majority?
I don't do whataboutism. I
No,
don't do whataboutism.
the point is
The
that you're
fact
saying
that somebody
Democrats care about starving people, and I'm giving you examples of places where there are lots of starving people and Democrats are in charge.
I already answered what part of the reason why I think Reagan was one of the worst presidents we've ever had, worse than Trump, is that he slashed funding to states and localities to help pay for his gigantic tax cuts for very wealthy people and corporations. And we've never recovered from that. And part of the reason why I agree with you that Bill Clinton was a terrible president and Obama was a heartbreaking disappointment is that they didn't restore those cuts. Instead, Obama made the exacerbating W. Bush tax cuts permanent. Don't get me wrong. You make it out like I'm some kind of a Democrat fanboy, and I love the Democrats. If that were the case, I'd go work for the DNC. Progressive Democrats of America, the reason we're not Democratic progressives is because we're progressives first and Democrats second. And it's very, very easy to say the Democrats are terrible on a whole bunch of different things. So I'm going to stand back and let this catastrophe happen. Now, I know that we both went to law school, and there was this
I didn't know you
concept
went to law
called,
school. Wait, I didn't know
well,
that.
well, I knew that we both did, but there's this concept called the last clear chance to avoid harm and injury. And in my opinion, saying, Hogan or Alsobrooks wouldn't be good enough for me to vote for. Not only vote for, voting has a mystical kind of um, metaphysical importance to people. And I think that's a good thing. I think people should be- behave as if voting mattered a lot more than it actually does. And for a lot of the reasons that you and I have talked about, I think we can agree. Each individual vote in the general election has a very marginal, minuscule impact because by that time, the viable choices have been already selected. That's why Progressive Democrats of America focuses a lot on primaries. In primaries, we can choose the choices. By November, it's way too late. And also, even voting in primaries isn't enough. That's why I get out there at the polls and try to get, somebody like Mark Elrich elected as opposed to one of his corporatist rivals. And he's very narrowly won primaries and then easily won in the general election because in Montgomery County, where we both live, the primary makes the
No,
choice
I
almost.
vote for Mark Elrich. I like Mark Elrich. I will, as I've said, vote for some Democrats in some circumstances.
Oh, I know, but it's not about you and it's not about me. It's
No, but
about the
but
theory of change.
I don't
It's
think
about the
that.
real theory of change. And to me, if you're frustrated with the Democratic Party, what I would suggest is this. You can yell and scream at them and make what, Hal, you and I agree, are very serious indictments of individual Democrats. You can say, the squad should become a suicide squad and destroy their careers by voting against Hakeem Jeffries. We can say that it would make us feel a lot better if AOC uh, quit the Democratic Party and declared herself a green or a socialist or anything else. She ain't going to do that. And I think, we both know why. If you defy a Pelosi, if you defy a Hakeem Jeffries, then you will not get a committee assignment that you want. You will
She didn't
not
get
get
any.
your
She didn't
legislation.
get any assignments, Mike. She didn't get them anyway. Pelosi didn't give
Well,
her the assignments anyway.
that's because she bucked Pelosi
No,
more than
but
she
you
should
just said
have.
she wouldn't buck Pelosi so she could get the assignment. She didn't
I
call for
didn't say
force the
that.
vote.
I didn't
She
say that.
refused to call for force the vote because
Well,
she
because
supposedly wanted to retain some
because she was
influence.
young and impetuous, but she's not stupid. That's why she didn't do force the vote.
No, she's not. She's what she is she's a calculating politician who wants to climb the ranks, and she's privileged. She's got her health care. She even said she couldn't believe it. She now has health care. But rather than saying, okay, I have health care, everyone else should too, she's saying, I have health care and I don't ever want to lose it. Well, that's not why we
That's
elected
not what
her.
she's saying. That's
Yes,
not what
it
she's
is what
saying.
she.
That's not
We
what she's
hear
saying.
different. I guess we hear a different message from
Well,
her.
go find me a quote where she said that.
No, she did say what she didn't say. I have health care and I'm never going to
I know
lose
she
it.
didn't.
What she
We
did
both know
say
she
was
didn't say
she
it.
said she was
See,
amazed. She said it's
see,
incredible when you have health care. That's what she said.
this is the thing. AOC is she's a very interesting person. There are a lot of people who have turned her into like a paragon of some kind, and she's a celebrity. Um, she works social media extremely well because she's of an age, a couple generations, 3 generations younger than the leadership. That said, that said, she's not crazy. She's not stupid. I mean, here's the
She's a
thing.
fake.
It's
Mike, she's a phony. She's a
well,
fake is what she is.
okay.
She is. I mean,
Okay.
that's just the bottom line. When she's had real meaningful opportunities to make change, she's chosen not to.
That's not true, but
It is
I
true. It's
understand.
absolutely true. When
I
she could
understand.
have confronted leadership, she was silent.
She did
That's what's
confront
true.
leadership, and she's still in the doghouse because of it. She absolutely
She
did confront leadership. But see, the
okay.
thing is that there are people who can never be satisfied, and I never thought you were one of them. But I mean, what do you want her to do? Like,
I wanted her to force the vote. I wanted her to
well,
call out. I wanted her to demand a
but that
ceasefire
was a
right now.
stupid
I want her to
idea.
demand a ceasefire right now in Gaza. I want her not to vote for Hakeem Jeffries to be House
Well,
Minority Leader or House Speaker.
Rashida Tlaib is demanding a ceasefire as a Palestinian
Well, she's right,
American,
and I'm glad.
and
And they should all
she's
be
doing
supporting. Everyone should be supporting her.
all. The squad is supporting her.
I don't
The
think
squad.
I didn't hear that from the last time I heard AOC in an interview. She didn't use the word ceasefire once, and she refused to call out. And she refused to call out Biden. She refused to call out Genocide Joe.
Well, here's the thing: calling the president Genocide Joe
No, but
makes
she
you
didn't call
feel.
him out.
It
She
makes you.
refused to
It
call him
makes you
out.
feel good. No, it makes you feel good, but it doesn't help any Palestinians.
No, what you do is you say this policy is wrong. We shouldn't be providing one dime to Israel while they're sending weapons, while they're killing.
Is on record saying that. You really need to.
She is not on record. That is false. She is not on record saying that.
I don't know where you're getting your information.
Well, let me get the video up for you because I played this earlier.
Look at. I don't care about videos. I care about the resolution in Congress that Rashida Tlaib sponsored, that PDA endorses, and I haven't heard you talk about that. So if you really cared about the Palestinians in Gaza, how come you're not having shows telling people?
I have talked about that. By the way, I have talked about this.
About what?
I have talked about the. I have talked about the
resolution.
I have talked about the performative cause by people who, in the end, support House leadership.
But see, what you're talking about is attacking performative measures in what you yourself are doing is performative. So all you're doing is meta performative.
Well, I don't have a vote in Congress. I can't. You're right. It's true. All I can do is talk. You're right there.
You know who does? The members of the House. And are you talking about people saying that people should contact their member of Congress and demand that they sign on to Rashida Tlaib's resolution?
You can't.
It will matter. It will matter.
Okay.
It's the only thing that will. That's the only thing the House can do.
No, what will matter is that if we can somehow coalesce behind true progressives who are willing to vote against people like Hakeem Jeffries,
how long can Palestinians wait? They're dying now.
No, I know. It's terrible.
Can they wait for Jill Stein to become president? Because that ain't going to happen anytime soon.
Actually, you know what, Mike, has made a difference? You know what really has made a difference? The fact that Biden is worried he could lose Michigan. That's what's making the difference.
Absolutely.
So by people saying we're not going to vote for the Democrat, so in other words, what's made the difference is people saying I'm not going to vote for the Democrat, right? Isn't that what it is?
We know who Rashida Tlaib is, right? You know where she's from?
It's not because of Tlaib. It's because the people of Michigan have said we're not going to vote for Genocide Joe. That's the reason. It's not some bill that doesn't get passed. It's because they're really afraid. They're afraid of losing.
You confuse me because what you're saying is force the vote, which would have lost, is a litmus test for you. And anybody who didn't support
it's important. It's important to me that you show that you will buck the corrupt House leaders.
You're also saying that Rashida Tlaib's resolution doesn't matter. That's something that could.
I didn't say it doesn't matter, but it's in the end, it's not nearly as relevant as her vote for Hakeem Jeffries. That was far more relevant.
I don't think so.
He decides what legislation gets a vote. Mike, he decides what legislation gets a vote.
And here's the thing: if they didn't vote for Hakeem Jeffries, who would have been the leader?
Well, you just keep voting for somebody who would be a better leader until they overrule you.
He would have won. Hakeem Jeffries would have won. Okay. And here's the other thing:
he would have won. That's true. He would have won because the House would have voted for him. The House Democrats would have voted for him. But Nancy Pelosi would not have been House Speaker if there had been a sufficient number.
On the first ballot.
Never. She never would have won. As long as the Progressive Caucus said, we will not vote for you unless you give in to our demands, she would have never become House Speaker.
And how do you know that didn't happen behind the scenes quietly?
Well, was there a vote for Medicare for all?
That wasn't their litmus test.
Well, what was there? Well,
that wasn't
whatever
the
their
hill that they were
demands
going to die
were,
on.
whatever their demands were, they were de minimis. They weren't
You
good
don't
enough.
see. You don't know what they were.
Oh, I know that we didn't get any meaningful change. There was no.
You don't know that. You don't
Yes,
know that.
I do know, Mike. How can you say I don't know that? We have more. We're burning more fossil fuels than ever. We're nowhere closer to having Medicare for all. I don't know what you can possibly say. There was no meaningful change in health care.
Well, PDA wanted Barbara Lee to run for Speaker of the House. That's how unrealistic we are. And Barbara Lee politely declined.
Yeah, because she didn't want to. She didn't want to challenge the House.
I'm making a point here, and you'd be able to hear it if you didn't yell at me. If Barbara Lee were Speaker of the House, would we still be burning more fossil fuels than ever before? Or do you think not? Do you think Barbara Lee could have stopped it?
I think she would have had. Yes, I don't think we would have gotten that deal that Hakeem Jeffries brokered, where the MVP was approved, and I think that she might well have gone to Biden and said, "You can't. We're not. That Willow Creek will not fly."
I think those two things might well be true, but we would still be burning more fossil fuels than ever before. I just do. I think that
we can't look.
I think I'm glad that I never had you as a professor, because I think you would have failed everybody in the class. Your grading system, and you're entitled to having any decision-making process you want, but I think that it's unreasonably punitive and unrealistic, and ultimately counterproductive for what you say you want.
Well, I think that I could make the same exact point at you. I would say that what you want is something you'll never get from the people that you are voting for. They'll never give you what you want. So I don't know how you can possibly vote for them, because the things that you want are things that they're not going to give you.
Well, first of all, I think you're wrong. I think that we've seen over and over that when we've had great leaps forward in policy dating back to the modern Democratic Party, even when it was still largely Dixiecratic, we saw great leaps forward under Franklin Roosevelt, who was a Democrat. We've seen great leaps forward under Lyndon Johnson, who was shamefully involved in the Vietnam War, prosecuting that war and committing war crimes, in my opinion. That said, we would, before we could have Medicare for all, we had to have Medicare, and Lyndon Johnson got that.
No, I'm a big fan of Lyndon Johnson's, and I think he's gotten a bit of a raw deal about Vietnam. I think he perceived, and perhaps rightly so, that it was a choice between civil rights and the Great Society or getting out of Vietnam. And I can't say he made the wrong decision. Civil rights was so critical to having a decent country that, Vietnam was awful too. I don't know. It's a hard question. He was caught in a very tough spot. But I'm a big fan of LBJ. I agree with you. Those were better presidents. But that's not the president we have now, and that's not the party we have now.
I would go so far as to say that LBJ and FDR were both forced to do some of the better things that they did. I think if it wasn't for Dr. King, LBJ would have continued dragging his feet. Hubert Humphrey, who I think got an even worse raw deal than LBJ, because Humphrey was actually against the war, but he lost out to Nixon.
If you read what LBJ was saying during the war and run up to it, to increasing, he was against it. He thought it was a terrible mistake.
Well, it's tragic. I do know that LBJ said that if he didn't support the Vietnam War, they'd impeach him, which is an interesting thing. I think that one of the reasons JFK was assassinated was because he was ambivalent about the Vietnam War, and more pointedly, he was very clear that the CIA was committing war crimes and giving presidents manipulative and misleading advice that led to the Bay of Pigs. Um, but I do think this throughout recent history of the United States, the things that have gotten passed that were actually good passed because of Democrats, but mostly because of pressure on Democrats to be better than they ordinarily would be, to create irresistible force where they saw that they would risk losing on one side if they did what we wanted them to do, but it was either the right thing to do and they understood that, or they understood they would lose even more if they didn't do the right thing. LBJ, when he signed the Civil Rights Act, said we've lost the South for a generation. And it was true. Democrats went from having a solid South in the presidential elections to the Republicans having the solid South. And LBJ took that into account and did the right thing. But he didn't do the right thing in a vacuum. He did the right thing because there was irresistible force led by Dr. King, led by people even more radical than Dr. King. And that's how we're going to get the Democrats to do what we need them to do, not what we want them to do. What we want is nice, but what we need are things like action on climate, 100%, action on elevating diplomacy with Russia and China and Iran. All these are areas where we could end up in wars, either a Cold War, like, a proxy war that's happening with Ukraine, which again, I think that some of my dear friends on the left, some of the people I love and respect, fail to account for how horrendous Putin is and why Putin invaded, when I think Putin could have gotten everything he wanted without an invasion, except for one thing. Putin is not entirely secure within Russia, and I do feel that there are other oligarchs in Russia who might have been gunning for him, some of whom might be even more fascistic and abusive than Putin. I can't say that for sure. I'm not an expert on internal Russian affairs, but I do know this. Putin was the one who invaded Ukraine, and whether the US behavior before or after that invasion, I'm against invasions. I'm just against them. And innocent Ukrainian men, women, and children are dying, and Putin is the number one reason for that. And innocent Russians,
We can
and
stop it.
not
We
so
have the
innocent
power to
Russians.
stop the killing. We certainly provoked Russia. I don't want to get into a long discourse. I'm not excusing Putin whatsoever.
You can't.
But like
can't.
Henry
And I
Kissinger, who
applaud
was
you for
wrong on
that.
everything except this, Russia understands, we understand in realpolitik that Russia needed a buffer zone, and we were encroaching right up to their very borders in Ukraine with NATO, and that was a terrible mistake for us to do it, and that led to the invasion. That resulted in the invasion.
I think.
Again, I don't want to get into an argument. I do this all
I
the
think. I
time.
think
It's a terrible mistake that we are continuing to fund that war. Those monies need to be used to help people in this country, not to lead to more death
Well,
and
it's worse than
bloodshed in
that,
Russia.
Hal. Not only do I agree with you, I'm going to say you don't go far enough, because the money that's being spent to so-called help Ukraine, it's being given to these war merchants, these merchants of death, and they admit that the equipment, some of it isn't even in the pipeline yet. By the time it gets there, there might not even be a Ukraine. The war might be long over. We're paying money. The taxpayers are paying money. It's money laundering. It's horrendous. And back in the day, to his credit, Harry Truman used to get in this beat up pickup truck, and he would go to places where they were supposed to be making munitions for World War II, and he would personally inspect to make sure they weren't grifting off the government. We don't have that
No,
anymore.
it's incredibly corrupt. The Pentagon has no
Oh
idea
my
where the
gosh, it
money's
doesn't even
going.
begin. The
And
corrupt doesn't
and by
even
the way,
begin.
there is a path to peace, and the path to peace is right now. We say, okay, Vlad, We heard what you said to Tucker. We're game. Let's talk right now. We're not. You said we have to stop providing aid to Ukraine. Well, we'll put a temporary hold on all, which we already did anyway. We'll temporarily hold resupplying as long as there's a ceasefire. You don't have to withdraw. We're not going to say no. We're not. That's not a condition. The condition is we just stop the killing right now. We go to Moscow. We'll go to Yalta. Whatever. Yalta has a good history, and we meet with Zelensky and you. And we have China there, and we have your allies and our allies and the Brits, and we sit down and we talk and we talk and we talk and we come up with something that we can all live with so we stop dying. That's what we should do. And by the way, that's what Trump called for. Now, I will say, I want to just make this concession because we've been on for almost 2 hours now, over an hour and a half.
Wow, time flies.
When you say that some democratic policies will prevent deaths, and that Republican policies will lead to those deaths, that to me is a good argument. I hate to admit it because it is the one argument I'm willing to accept, that there are lives that will be saved if you vote for the lesser evil. Because the Democrats are evil. The ones that are running are evil. They're bad people. They're corrupt people. But for whatever reason, they do support more than Republicans, or they support and Republicans don't, some absolutely essential safety net programs. And I get that. And I think that's an argument that I have trouble, I can't really rebut it. What I can say is this, that what Immanuel Kant said, which I don't fully agree with, is that if you're only responsible for what you do, you're not responsible for what other people do. If you tell, you're only responsible for telling the truth. So if a murderer comes into your house and says, "Where's your wife?" and you say, "Well, she's upstairs," and then the murderer goes up there and kills your wife, you're not responsible. Well, I disagree. We have responsibilities to prevent others from harming people. It's not enough that we don't harm others. We have a responsibility to prevent others from harming. But I'm very taken by what
I brought up the last clear chance doctrine.
Well, that's a little bit different, because the last clear chance is who could stop, whose actions were the last actions to cause it, or the last opportunity to,
if you could have prevented harm.
It's similar. Yeah. It's somewhat similar, but it's generally, I think, employed in cases like of a traffic accident where two cars are driving at each other and one could swerve.
It's an analogy more than a hard fast,
but okay, that's a fair, you're right. Now that I think about it, your analogy is fair. So I give you that. But I will say what I heard Aaron Monte say, which I thought was a very good point on the show. He said, yes. He said there are really important issues where the Democrats aren't as bad as Republicans. But there are also issues that are really important to me where maybe the Republicans aren't as bad as the Democrats. And he pointed Ukraine out as a good example, where at least there are Republicans who are really willing to say we should stop funding Ukraine. And it seems like the Democrats are all in for more funding for Ukraine. I thought that was a very astute point. I think Kyle Klinsky said, I think it was in 2016, I disagree with him now, that Trump was just better than Hillary on trade. And it's true.
Agree.
He clearly was. And that's a really important issue that impacts on millions and millions of people's lives. So,
and better than Reagan and Bill Clinton and H.W. Bush.
And also Trump was better on war. Trump didn't get us in any new wars.
Ross Perot was right on trade.
Yes, he was.
Al Gore was wrong. I remember there was a Larry King debate where Ross Perot was, I was rooting for Gore, but Ross Perot made a lot of good points, and history was kind to what Ross Perot was saying, because I don't think protectionism.
But you wouldn't support him. Because he's third party.
My first presidential vote was for John Anderson, a third party candidate. And not just because he has a similar name to the lead singer of Yes, one of my favorite rock bands, but I worked for John Anderson in that election. And because Jimmy Carter had done a bunch of things that I found were not acceptable. And I underestimated Reagan's ability to win, but I don't feel that bad about it because the Carter political advisors wanted Reagan to be their challenger, and it didn't work out well for them. It
Well,
turns
that was
out
true for Hillary in
it was true
2016.
for Hillary.
And
That's
you didn't
right.
vote for Hillary, right? You did not vote for Hillary.
I wrote in Bernie
You
Sanders
wrote
the
in Ronald
last two
Reagan.
presidents. No, I would never, never.
No, that's what Larry Hogan did. No, no, that's what Hogan did. I know.
I wouldn't even vote in Ron Reagan, who's a terrific guy, and he's been very vocal on politics and calling out his dad's party, violating what Ronald Reagan called the 11th commandment, which is thou shalt not speak evil of a fellow Republican, something that he never followed himself because he was a raving hypocrite on top of everything else. But oh, you know what? I forgot in my indictment of Reagan was how he refused to provide any funding during the AIDS epidemic. And when his Surgeon General wanted to do something proactive to deal with the AIDS epidemic, he ordered that person not to do it. So,
All right.
big
So
F you to
anyway, just
Ronald
see,
Reagan.
we all agree Reagan was an awful president. So just back to this question of do you vote for lousy, bad Democrats? Because again, if there's a truly ethical Democrat running who has consistently stood up for justice and for equality, I'm going to vote for that person. I'm not aware of who they are, but I would, and I would. But the
Well, if you
problem
think
I'm having
AOC, if
here
you think
is that
AOC
at some
is
point,
yeah,
is that I would ask you then, is there any way, as long as a Democrat is pro-choice, and because you said there's no litmus test, is there any litmus test a Democrat can flunk? As long as a Democrat is pro-choice and pro the bare minimum safety net programs, does that mean you'll vote for them against a Larry Hogan, against a DeSantis, against a Nikki Haley?
I would most likely vote against just about anybody who is running against DeSantis. I can't really think of anybody who's more despicable, loathsome, bloodthirsty, and fascistic. I'm glad you brought up DeSantis because he has brought together a militia of people who have violently confronted voters, who have terrified former felons who've done their time and were reenfranchised by a vote of the people in Florida that was on the ballot. He has sent this armed force to Texas to quote unquote guard the border. This is stuff that goes back to like the days of Aaron Burr, where he declared himself the emperor of Florida. I mean, as bad as a lot of politicians have been, Ron DeSantis might be, people accuse Trump of being Mussolini, but I'm telling you, DeSantis is, everything but having the nickname El Duce. He is,
No, I
systematically
deliberately picked,
attacking people.
Mike, I deliberately gave you two really, or several really loathsome people, including, I think, Nikki Haley, who is really horrible, to say, okay, so you're saying as long as they're for a few bare minimum essential safety net programs like soup kitchens, and as long as they'll put pro-choice justices on the court, or at least nominate them, that's enough for you, at least if those are the Republicans they're running against.
If you're asking me how I personally vote, or are you asking me how PDA endorses people, or are you
No, I
asking
know
me
how
my
you already
theory
told
of
us that
change?
PDA endorses people by they have to meet those litmus tests. What was it? Pro Medicare for all.
Medicare for all, climate, ending corporate rule, fair, free, and open elections, getting big money out of elections, support for organized labor. There's like a handful of pillars
Well,
that we have.
endorsements are a little different because you could vote for a candidate, you say they're awful, but I'll still vote for them because the alternative is worse. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I do find, despite everything I've said here and the importance of not voting for Democrats most of the time, I agree with you about DeSantis. He scares me definitely more than Trump in certain ways, not in every way, but in certain ways. Also, I find Haley very, very frightening in a lot of ways. But it would be very tough for me to vote for a Joe Manchin under any circumstances, even if he was running against one of them. I don't see myself, because the other issue we face is the existential one of the climate holocaust. And even if, yes, you'd have fewer people starving in the short run, in the end, in the not much longer run, we'd all be dead. We're all going to drown anyway. So I can't really, at some point you have to have some standards. And those are people I can't support on either side.
Oh, there's this have a beer with them test where people say, well, would you want to have a beer with W. Bush? Would you want to have a beer with Trump or, whoever? And I don't give a damn about that test. I don't care if they're, friendly or likable. I've met David Trone. I have not met Elsa Brooks or Hogan. David Trone's a very friendly guy. He's
He
very
is. He's
easy to
very
get along
he's
with.
charming. He's charming. I met him for an hour trying to persuade him to support Medicare for all, and he just won't do it. He will not do it. And it's very hard. It's horrible.
It'd be good to have a drink with him because he'd be buying.
Yeah, he would be buying.
So, but
he's also not the sharpest blade in the drawer. He just is not that smart a guy. I will say this: you have to be smart to build a business, but he's maybe business smart, but he's not in any way an intellectual.
Well, you know what he is, Hal. He fooled me on that. I would have said the exact same thing you did, but I spoke with somebody who knew him a lot better. He, if you remember that old show, Columbo, where Columbo would come into a situation and he'd like ask a bunch of questions and, he'd leave and then he'd come back and he'd say, I just remembered one thing. Aren't you allergic to blueberries? And it would like unravel the whole case. And he was like, seemed to be out of it. He seemed to be like, a clown, but he was the smartest guy in the room. He just didn't act like it. I think Trone suckers people by coming across as very affable. I think he's much sharper than he gives off. And I've met a number of people who are like that, who you would think this guy doesn't have a lot going on or this woman isn't the sharpest person. But oh my gosh, behind the scenes,
I don't think he really understood, or maybe he just was pretending he didn't understand. I don't think he really understood Medicare for all, and we spent a lot of time trying to explain it to him.
And I think he understands it.
Well, maybe he does now, but this was 5-6 years ago, and over time, maybe it's finally sunk in. But it's really not that hard to understand.
That's what I'm saying.
It really isn't. And it seemed to take him an awful long time to get it. He may be, I've seen people who are very business savvy, and obviously he is that. But, in terms of understanding the issues that beset us, I don't think he's there.
I don't think he wanted to challenge you. I think he was smart enough to realize that there is no real argument against Medicare for all. The only argument against Medicare for all that I think is even partially reasonable is that it's a compromised position. It doesn't go far enough, that it's a public good. It should be 100% paid for by public funding and administered like the
isn't that
VA
what
hospital.
Medicare for all is? I mean, my understanding
is Medicare for all is a compromise.
Well,
Medicare for all it's a publicly funded, privately administered system, which to me is good enough. There are some people, I guess hardcore.
Well, you prefer
socialists.
A national health service like they have in the UK. I think we've been through this.
That's the socialist point of view, is that a national health system like they have in the UK would be preferable to a Medicare for all. Ben Cardin, of all people, said that the reason he wouldn't support that is that he'd be worried that it would be attacked like it was under Thatcher and the Tory governments, where they bled it dry. And the reason they were able to do that is that even the UK system isn't a socialist system because it's got a for-profit layer built into it. Here's an example. If you're a rich person in the House of Lords, Paul McCartney or whatever, if you've got enough money, you can go see a doctor immediately, a private doctor. And that is not a purely, I don't know if there is a purely
Well, maybe
socialistic
Japan or
system.
France.
Maybe
France is definitely
Venezuela.
not. Maybe Japan. France is definitely
Maybe
not. I know it's not.
Venezuela. Yeah,
Yeah.
Venezuela actually might be. A friend of mine went to Venezuela and he said that they have posters on the wall of the hospitals and the doctor's offices that say, if somebody tries to charge you for medical care, report them. It is against the law. So I would say Venezuela might have the most socialistic system. But
All right. Well, for whatever.
ironically, it's underwritten by fossil fuels.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're all corrupt to a degree, to some degree or another. Nothing's perfect. I actually always thought the Canadian system made a ton of sense. I like having independent doctors who bill the government. I think that's an ideal. But from what I understand, looking at the numbers, and I was very disappointed to see this, of single payer systems, Canada does not have the best results. And there are a number of, it's also somewhat more costly. Now, I don't know why that is. There may be questions of administration. It may depend on the province. But I just as soon, look, we are both, as humans, we are innately private and public. We have a side to us that has our own private lives and that doesn't want the government to know what we're doing and wants to, and we love people that we love and we care more about our own families and our friends than we do about everyone else. And that's part of human nature. But we also, I think, recognize a duty to others. Or if we don't, we should. that we should also do. And so I like a system that says, hey, healthcare is a human right. Everyone gets it. We're going to guarantee it. You're not going to ever have to pay for it, except through your taxes if you're wealthy and you can afford it. But we also recognize that doctors don't want to be told how to care for people and have to fall under the rubric of the government and have a government bureaucrat overseeing them. So we're also going to have a private market, meaning this. People can choose their doctors. People can choose this doctor or that doctor. They still won't have to pay for it. And the compensation is going to be the same. But you'll also have, and I like that. I like that in theory. Apparently in practice, at least as far as I can tell, in Canada, it hasn't been. It's better than what we have now. It is apparently not worked as well in Canada as I would have hoped.
Now. Yeah.
All right. I want to make a final point. If you look at the chart, I put this back up. Under casino gambling, I had originally wrote Trone supports. I had assumed he supported, but it wasn't fair to him. I did a ton of research just as I was scrambling before the program. I want to be very, very clear. I think it's casino gambling. And also, you can read, Mike was making the distinction between casino and online gambling. I don't make that distinction. If you support one, you support the other. A lot of the casinos are underwriting the online gambling.
Right.
I agree. Casinos in a casino.
That was my point as well.
But they're very similar, if not the same. They're awful.
Gambling in general.
It's incredibly regressive. Trone, I don't want to, it's not fair to him to say he supports it when at least he maybe does, but I can't prove it. Know. So I won't say it. I don't know. I also give Trone credit for one other thing. Under Israel-Palestine, he has called for a ceasefire there, which is pretty ballsy because he is, as it says, an AIPAC minion donor, which is awful. I shouldn't have that second quote after donor. Sorry about that, folks. That's a typo. He gives $100,000 a year, or at least he used to AIPAC, which is awful. But I mentioned, I want to be very clear that he has called for a ceasefire. Now, I don't think these public statements mean very much the way Mike does. I don't think saying I support Medicare for all means very much if you vote for a leader who opposes it.
Well, how about if you co-sponsor it or lead sponsor it?
No, you have to actually be willing to take on your leadership. You have to be willing to say, I will not support this leader. This person shouldn't be our leader.
Okay, well, that's a narrow criterion. Which
it's not narrow. It's a litmus test for me. Nothing's more important. Nothing's more important than who the leader is. Nothing is more important in Congress than who your leader is.
Well,
That's the defendant defining
picking
issue.
fights that you're going to lose might make you feel vindicated or big and bold, but
Right, but you don't vote
it's
for
not
that person.
strategic. It's not
Agreed.
strategic.
Agreed. But there were enough progressives to prevent Pelosi from being speaker unless she gave them what they wanted. And with regard to Hakeem Jeffries, sure, you might lose it, but at least you make the stand where it matters, because you're going to lose on the fight. You say it doesn't matter. You're picking a fight you're going to lose, but you're picking a fight you're going to lose if you're calling for a ceasefire and Hakeem Jeffries is your leader. You're going to lose that too.
I think Hakeem Jeffries is persuadable on that. I think that I distinguish between people who are persuadable from people who just flat out will not.
This is a guy who took the new House members to Israel on a trip over the summer so they could learn about what a great country it is.
Didn't you just say David Trone called for a ceasefire? I mean,
Trone did, but he's not the House Speaker. He's not. I know, and I give him credit. APAC. Well, I'll tell you what. When that happens, if that happens, I'll be really, really pleased. But I wouldn't count on it. That's what I wouldn't count on from someone who's bought off. And it's a little different too, because Trone gives money to AIPAC, whereas Jeffries takes money.
Yeah, what's worse? You know, that's a very interesting philosophical question. I mean, Trone could be playing a long game where he's giving money to AIPAC to try to modify or moderate their positions, and he could pull out his money from them at a key moment to get them to do something. I would hope that's true. I wouldn't, like in your words, I wouldn't count on it, but
well, it means the fact that Trone gives them money, he doesn't feel beholden to them.
Well, see, that's a very good point. That's a very good point in terms of who has leverage over whom. And I think that's why these things can get very complicated. And we as human beings strive for definitive answers. Sometimes there's a chaos theory at work. And
I agree with you.
I've spent enough time on working in Congress and trying to persuade people to do different things. And I've been successful. I personally persuaded at least 6, maybe as many as 10 members of Congress to co-sponsor Medicare for All back when it was HR 676, when they were all running around with their heads caught on fire because they were afraid that Trump was going to get rid of Obamacare. And I would say, well, what is the best way to show Trump that you're not going to back down than to try to push even further? And I had one staffer after another look at me and say, I hadn't thought of it. And just between you and me and your wonderful audience, I made up that argument on the spot.
I'll give you an attaboy when it happens, Mike. No, that's good work. That's good work.
Slowly. It's happening slowly. A lot of these things take time. You know how long it took to get any civil rights done? I mean, you know how long it took to get women the vote? These things, if people said it hasn't happened in the last 20 years, this is never going to work, we wouldn't have had any of these things. These things take an agonizing amount of time.
The presupposition there is that following the current strategy will ultimately lead to a better result. I don't accept that.
What current strategy is it? I think PDA's strategy is showing benefits.
No, the Mike Hersh strategy, which is any blue will do, is what I understand.
In November. In primaries, you fight like hell to get socialist.
But Democrats. in the end, if what seems to have really motivated Joe Biden is the fear that he could lose Michigan. Or the
hope that he could win it.
Well, he could win it if he does the right thing, but that's not going to change. But if politicians are doing the wrong thing, then you have to say to them, unless you well, it's a carrot and a stick at the same time. We won't support you as long as you do the wrong thing, which is what the House Democrats have continued to do.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think Rashida Tlaib's resolution does make a difference. I think what it does is it brings out voices who have maybe been intimidated and afraid. Because if you speak out, calling for a ceasefire is really scary. And David Trone giving money to APAC rather than relying on money from APAC might be a very bold move, but they could come in very strongly for Alsobrooks.
Yeah. No,
You have to
I'm not.
understand, they've been sabotaging progressives in, they took out Andy Levin, who's a really great Democrat and a really great guy. He's a little bit of a nepotism baby because his family has had seats in Michigan
Well,
forever,
Carl Levin
but
was
he
his
is
dad.
really good. And Sandra Levin was his uncle. And
Sandra,
and
yeah.
and so but I've met him. He's a righteous guy. I met him when we were rallying to get more money from the NLRB, from a bunch
So,
of Democrats.
so
Hold on. This is a good story. You're going to like this. Jamal Bowman, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. Um, I don't want to leave people out.
it's okay. Leave him out.
Well, anyway, we were rallying on Capitol Hill for Biden to fully fund the NLRB, which actually has fewer people working there now than they did under Reagan, which is another reason to be really pissed at Biden. But I understand that that made a difference. Not that I made a difference because I was there, but those members of Congress who were there made a difference. And Andy Levin had lost. He was, a lame duck, but he was there rallying. And I went up to him. I said, what's next for you? Are you going to try to run again? He said, I can make a difference. I don't have to be in Congress. So he was not in Congress to be in the family business of warming that seat that his dad had held before him.
Well, I
He
was
was in
sorry that
Congress
Andy
to make a
Levin
difference.
lost. I was sorry he lost. I thought he would have been a good choice for that district. He lost to, I think, an APAC backed
That
Democrat.
he was taken out by APAC.
And I don't believe Hakeem Jeffries supported him, just as he didn't support Summer Lee, although he does support Summer Lee for reelection, which I
Now,
give him credit for.
yeah, now PDA was among those who knocked doors, made phone calls, raised money for Summer Lee.
I won't support
We
Summer Lee because she supported Hakeem Jeffries, the guy who was against her
Okay, I understand. I
for the House.
understand. We
But
we love
let me
Summer
ask
Lee.
you
We
this,
think
Mike.
she's wonderful.
Do you think the fact that you've had the opportunity to rub elbows with a few of these progressives in Congress has caused you to maybe be a little bit willing to cause you to have rose-colored glasses when you look at their records, or do you think
Absolutely not.
you're
Absolutely
giving them the
not.
benefit of the doubt a little too much, maybe?
Absolutely not. We've gone to the
Okay.
Met as PDA
Okay.
with people who we disagreed with on issues. Uh, there's this saying, there no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. Unfortunately, too many people don't follow that
Well, I
because
will say this: when I worked for Our Revolution, I couldn't believe how they would just bend over backwards to try to provide the most warm and fuzzy atmosphere for people who often were not voting the way they should have voted and were not championing progressive causes. And I found that to be very, very upsetting. But my guess is that what I didn't like, you probably wouldn't have found as objectionable. So who
Well,
knows?
it doesn't hurt you to be nice to people you disagree with, because that's often an effective way of influencing them and coming to an agreement that you
It
can live
does
with.
hurt you if they take you for granted and aren't willing to modify their positions to suit you. Then it does hurt
That
you.
that's the chaos theory, because some people respond only to getting yelled at or a kick in the teeth, like
No,
the
it's not
all the
that.
best.
It's
No,
just
no,
that
some people do. No, I agree
it's
with you.
no,
Some people
but
need
you're
to be.
presenting it as though either or. Either
No,
we
it's a
bend over
combination. That's why I
backwards
said
and say,
carrot and
welcome,
stick.
welcome. You're so wonderful. We love you. You're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Or you suck. We
sometimes
hate
that's
you.
the sometimes that's the best way to get something you want from somebody, is to love bomb them and bite
It
your
could
tongue and
be
hold your
in
nose.
some
Sometimes
cases,
it is.
maybe, but
Sometimes it
let's
is.
face
It
it,
flat
you
out
have in
is.
plenty of cases it isn't. And at
Well, in
least with
some
the
cases
Democrat
it's some cases they do
and
take you for granted.
progressives
Yeah.
and progressives have consistently been betrayed by and left behind by the people we've supported who have consistently gone along with House leadership. unlike, I'm going to
really
go right
glad,
back here
yeah.
because I was thinking about this again and how mad it made me when you said this. How Republican conservatives have gotten so much more from their party and their leadership than
No, I never said
Democrats have
that.
gotten,
I never said
progressives have
that.
gotten from
I
theirs.
disagree with that. I disagree with that.
Are you serious? They've held up the conservatives in Congress have held up all that the billions of dollars for Ukraine. It's been a huge win for them. And for
Okay.
us too, by the
On,
way.
on that one issue, their ability to stop anything from happening,
To stop the money to go for killing. Let's not say not for anything. Let's be very, very
it's not
clear.
going for
What they're
killing. It's not,
doing is
you're
good for
grandstanding.
Ukraine and for our country.
We discussed this. That money is not going to Ukraine. That money is going to Lockheed Martin. It's
So
going to
even
Boeing.
better, right? So even better. What the House Republicans are doing is
It's not really
good.
better. Well, here's the thing.
No, you would rather have the money go to Lockheed Martin?
How about this? You tell me what you think, and
No,
I'll
I
tell
want to
you
know.
what
Do
I
you
think.
think it?
Don't tell me.
No, I'm
Don't tell
asking.
me
No,
what I think, because that's
have
rude.
the Republicans
You're better than that,
have the
Hal.
right? Has the Freedom Caucus managed to really gum up the works when it comes to many billions of dollars going, if not to Ukraine, then to defense contractors? Wherever it would go would be a bad place, right? So we're glad that they've stopped it.
You're really good at laser beam focusing on one thing and then making it out to be more than it really is. My point is this. The so-called Freedom Caucus, which does not support reproductive freedom, does not support freedom for people to read books that they find threatening, does not support parents' freedom to raise their children as they want to. The Freedom Caucus is really a fascist caucus. And what have they accomplished? Well, I think they've inadvertently stopped the government from doing some things that you and I think are bad things to do. They've also gummed up progress on immigration. They've gummed up progress on climate. They've gummed up progress on minimum wage and reindustrializing
The immigration
the
bill that
country.
they've stopped is a bad bill. The immigration bill would give
It was
tremendous authority to
mixed.
Biden.
It
That
was
would be
mixed.
bad.
It
Well,
was
it's
mixed.
mixed at best. All right, fair enough.
It's better than Greg Abbott killing people who are seeking asylum. You know, taking, making traps to violently hurt women and children who are fleeing oppression that came
No,
about
I agree.
because
But
the
both
US
parties,
overthrew their
are really
societies.
bad on immigration. The
The
Republicans, at least
Republicans
Trump
are
has been worse.
much worse,
Trump has been worse. Both
much
parties are
worse.
really bad. I'm not going to. You can't.
Well,
The Democrats have been awful on this issue as well. But I agree with you. The Republicans are even crueler. The Republicans are crueler, but both are bad.
and far more violent. I say Democrats are mixed. I think some Democrats are actually very good on immigration. I think some are beholden to special interests in ways that blunt their effectiveness. Absolutely. But here's the thing. The misnamed Freedom Caucus, a bunch of lunatics, have basically, this is what they've accomplished. They've given the Democrats a golden opportunity to retake the House. Unfortunately, the Democrats are squandering their ability to hold the Senate for a number of reasons. And number one is Biden's going to be a drag on the top of the ticket.
Yeah,
There's no
but
question
Mike,
about
the
that.
point I'm making, the point that, well, I agree. I certainly don't like the Freedom Caucus, but some of the things they've done, I do agree with, and I'm glad. I'm glad they're against the aid to Ukraine. I think it's an incredibly good thing that so far they've held up. Wherever it would go is good.
That
said,
are they against huge weapon spending? Are they, all
I don't
the
know. I'm
above
not.
on
I'm just talking
energy?
about one. I'm talking about one particular policy that they are right on, and the Democrats are wrong on. And the Freedom Caucus has managed to stop that money for now from going where it shouldn't go. And I'm saying to you, as far as we know, we cannot. That's a tangible win for the constituents of the Freedom Caucus, that they can say, this is what my right-wing extremists, my Marjorie Taylor Greene, this is what my Lauren Boebert delivered for me. What can the AOC constituent who says, I voted for AOC because I really wanted some real movement towards Medicare for all? I really wanted to get the
Well, so you can't do
well, let me
that.
finish. Let me ask the
You can't
question.
cherry
What
pick,
can that
though.
constituent say that AOC has done for me?
If the Progressive Caucus, which actually has a lot more power than the Squad. The Squad is just a small group of people who are outspoken and get a lot of attention from the media. The Progressive Caucus and PDA worked side by side with the Progressive Caucus on this. We got a bunch of good things in that, misnamed Inflation Reduction Act. There are a lot of good things in that, and progressives made it happen. We have been beating up on people when the Democrats had the House. Things were possible. What can the Progressive Caucus get through now when the Republicans can't even run the House? The Republicans can't even get their agenda through the House. How can you expect anybody else to? I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to be fair. And last night I watched a basketball game where the New York Knicks played themselves into a huge hole, and they were able to fight against the Houston Rockets to a tie. And they managed to get it to a tie on the road. The Knicks had a lot of injuries anyway. On the last play of the game, uh, 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 time was running out. There was 0.3 of a second left in the clock. The refs called a foul on Jalen Brunson and basically handed the game to Houston because their guy got 3 foul shots. Any one of them would win the game. He made 2, missed the last one on purpose. I'm not asking the officials to be perfect. I'm just asking them to be fair, and they weren't fair. I'm just asking you to be fair. What you call an accomplishment by the Freedom Caucus is illusory. That money is going to go to Lockheed Martin and Boeing. If it's not for Ukraine, it'll be for Taiwan. If it's not for Taiwan, it'll be because we're supposed to be afraid of Venezuela, or we need to gear up because Netanyahu wants us to attack Iran. That money is going to go through. That money's going to go through. They didn't stop anything, and I wish they had. I wish they had. But part of the reason why they can't have a durable victory is that they're erratic and episodic. And the reason, and here's the thing, I don't like to get into motivations, but in this case, it's very important. The reason that they're against aid to Ukraine is that Trump is against aid to Ukraine. And if Trump changes his mind tomorrow, I'm not going to say he is or he isn't, but if Trump changed his mind, they would fall in line behind him because they're Trumpians more than they are Republicans. And I think that's a serious problem. But here's something that I think could be interesting. If Trump causes an irrevocable split within the Republican Party, and the Republican Party splits into a Trump party and an anti-Trump party, then I hope the Democrats also split into a corporate party and a people's party, because I think that's the way forward.
Well, of
But I don't
course. I mean,
think
we
the
have to.
Greens,
The
I don't,
Democratic Party can't be. So you're agreeing in the end, the Democratic Party, as it is currently constituted, can't really be a vessel for change.
it has it
But let me just no.
it has to be dramatically reformed,
But
and that's why PDA
are you
exists.
are you criticizing
But I
the?
don't think the
Are you? Well,
Greens
let me ask my
or
question. Are
I
you?
I
Because
don't think
are
I
you
don't think voting
criticizing?
for
Go ahead.
you can roll your eyes. I think that voting in a way that makes it more likely, and voting is less important than advocating. And you have a platform and you have a responsibility. The whole Spider-Man thing, to those who are granted great power, also have great
I wish I had
responsibility.
any power. I have zero power, but
My
yes.
corollary. Well, here's my corollary. To those of us like you and me who have middling power comes middling responsibility. And I think that we have a responsibility to obey the last clear chance doctrine. I think Hogan getting elected to the Senate would be horrendous. I think that he'd fall in line behind the Rick Scotts and Mitch McConnells and the other architects of doom, who are really bad people. I mean, not only corrupt, but I mean like sadistic and very frightening in their inclinations and what they would like to do. You look at
Getting
what Rick
elected to the
Scott
Senate would be.
oh, I think doing anything or failing to do anything to prevent the Republicans from getting the Senate, I think is a dereliction of duty. I think it falls upon all reasonable, sane, caring people who give a shit about anything. You got to keep the Republicans out. The Democrats, you might uh, feel betrayed or disgusted or repulsed by them. The Republicans are freaking coming to kill you. They're climate deniers on any
Yeah,
index.
I
I mean,
don't.
you can
As
find one or two things where the Republicans aren't as bad as
dude,
Democrats or
dude,
whatever,
is it
but you
is
gotta
it worse
stop
to be a
them.
climate denier or to just simply say, oh yeah, what we're doing is really bad, and then to greenlight all these LNG facilities on the Gulf, and then say, oh well, we'll
Well,
pull back a few now.
didn't
I
Biden,
mean,
yeah,
I don't. It
pulling
doesn't
back a
matter.
few
Either
is
way, we're
better
all
than,
dead.
well, one taps the brakes not hard enough to slow us down from where we're going. The other one is
Well, he
pounding the
didn't
foot
tap the
on that
brakes. He stepped on the
accelerator.
gas. Biden stepped on the gas, and
Well, didn't he
that
pull back a few LNG plants?
they
See, this
just
is,
said we're not going to prove anymore until after November. That was it.
well, that's better than full speed ahead. It is. It's qualitatively better. Is it enough better?
Well, it's
No.
been full speed ahead because he already broke the record that Trump set for most
There
oil and
are
gas
a
production.
lot of things have been bad. That's the whole point.
All
If
right.
things weren't bad, then you and I would be talking about, spring training coming up, or planting trees or doing
Well,
something
they're bad
else.
because we keep doing the same thing over and over again. We debate
Well, who's we?
whether
You
to
don't, I
which
don't.
whether to vote for Republicans or Democrats. Not we don't debate. Let's just vote for neither of the above.
How
All right,
about get
Mike. Thank
involved in the
you.
primaries? How about get involved in the primaries with pdamerica.org? Make decisions before the decisions are made for you.
Final word, Mike Hersh. I'll be back tomorrow.